Now we turn our attention to another challenge that needs to be addressed. It's about basic education. We've seen several reports in different states how students take lectures or classes, if you will, on the trees, in dilapidated classrooms. We've heard complaints about the universal basic education, how the counterpart funding does not seem to be coming for those who are supposed to. Several summits have been held about all of those, but at the moment it still does appear as though we're not doing as much or where we need to be. Our correspondent, Babajide Ogunsanwo joins us now. We're not going to that report. He's our data and information analyst. He's been looking into that and see what is going on and what can we do. Thank you for coming on here today.
Thank you, Chamberlain Gimba. Good morning.
Great to have you
Basic
too.
education is a very, very crucial aspect of education. It has to be a foundation upon which several others can be built. But if the foundation is bad, you know, the scripture says, what can the righteous do? You've been digging into this. What have you seen?
So, and you're right. If the foundation is bad, what can be done? So let's try and make this more interesting. So if there were a primary school student with us this morning, let's imagine he's somewhere seated with us here, and we gave him three options to either pick between a dictionary, to pick what I'll show you in this envelope, or to pick a demonstration of this.
My goodness, you're holding, is that an AK-47?
DSS don't need to bother. We've checked it out, DSS. Don't worry about it. This is just toy. So go ahead, please.
But let's assume it's real and he had a young man had these three options. Today, which is he likely to pick? Now, if he were a smart boy and I offered him a dictionary, here's what he will tell me. He will ask me, do I know that currently there are 53 million Nigerians that have full-time jobs? However, more than half of them have, at the very best, a primary school leaving certificate. So here's what it means. It simply means you can easily get a job if all you have is a primary school degree. So there's really no strong incentive to read anymore. So he's going to tell me that he perhaps doesn't need this anymore. Now, if I were to pick up this brown envelope, and most times you know what the brown envelope means.
What's inside this one?
It means the color is brown.
Now, what I have here is 20 naira. Now, what does 20 naira mean? If he's a smart young boy, he's going to do some maths for me. Here's what he will tell me. He will tell me in the 2017 budget proposal, we have two things. We have a budget, capital budget from the Ministry, for the Ministry of Education of 50 billion naira. Now, we also have a budget for the Universal Basic Education Commission of 92 billion naira. So, Chamberlain, put that together, we get 142 billion naira. Now, that sounds big, 142 billion naira, Gimba. However, if he's a smart boy as well, he will tell me that, do I know that there are 19 million children that attend public primary schools? So even if the government were to give all of this 142 billion naira to public primary school students, that comes to an equivalent of only 20 naira per day, per child. So it simply means it's very unlikely to go for the dictionary, and it's very unlikely to go for the money. He has this option. This has been in the news all throughout the week. The rifle. Let's look at the Constitution, for instance. Any mention of rifle? No. Any mention of amnesty? Zero. No mention of terrorists. The closest you find to terrorist is tourist. Any mention of kidnapping? Zero. Education, over 15 mentions. Well, here's what that young boy will tell me. He will tell me that in the 2017 budget, Gimba, the budget for amnesty, 65 billion naira. The budget for amnesty. The capital budget for the Ministry of Education, only 50 billion naira. So today in our history, the budget for amnesty is higher than the budget for capital education, for the capital budget from the Ministry of Education. So there's a strong incentive to go for this, because this does seem now to have a lot of power. So much power that our budget for amnesty is higher than our capital budget for education. So that's where the problem lies.
So is it that states not getting enough funds to send people to school or to augment the schools, or the students don't want to go to school?
So there are about three options. The first is, let's look at the family. So we shouldn't just put it all we shouldn't put all the blames on the government, federal or state. The challenge today is because families earn so little, they spend 64% of their spendings on food. So families have to spend 64% of all their purchases on only food. Compare that to the US, where families only spend 13%. So in simple terms, what the evidence of today shows us from the National Bureau of Statistics is families spend less than 1% of their total spending on education. Clearly, families do not have enough money. And so, Gimba, what happens is because families don't have enough money, children often have to assist their parents to raise this money. And so let's connect this all to our thirst for GDP growth. Now in Nigeria today, there are 7 sectors, Chamberlain, that contribute to 70% of our GDP growth. 7 sectors.
Okay.
The top 2 sectors are crop production and trade. So it simply means...
So crop production is the highest.
Crop production is the highest. And we know crop production is still largely subsistent farming. So it does mean, Gimba, that if we are growing the economy and we're growing crop production and we're doing a lot of trading, and we know trading also has a lot to do with buying and selling, it also tells us that and gives us an indication of where the students and a lot of students that should be in primary schools, where they are going. They are going to the farms, and they are going on the streets, and they are going to shops to sell. So it simply means, Gimba, that on one hand, we could all be smiling that GDP is growing, especially crop production and trade. But it simply means that even though we are smiling that we are having significant growth in crop production and trade, it potentially means more children are going out of school.
So this clearly, it's an analogy that doesn't really speak well of how educationally inclined the government's policies are. We're going to talk about that a little more when we come back. But for now, we'll take a quick short break, and when we come back, we'll focus on that as well.
Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. We're talking about the Big 7. That's what you called it, and we're looking at some of those figures. And boy, go ahead, please.
Oh yes, and so today the controversy is, yes, we want to grow the economy, but 2 sectors account for the chunk of what we're happening. 2 activities, and that's crop production and trade. Crop production is still largely subsistent farming, and trade often is a margin business, buying and selling, shops, kiosks. So in most times, when those 2 sectors are growing, it's because a lot of people are involved in those sectors, Chamberlain. So it simply does mean that there's a very high possibility that when those sectors are improving and our GDP is growing, it's because a lot of children that should be in school are on the roads, are on the streets, are in shops, are on the farms. That's the real way to look at growth and how it impacts on school enrollment.
When you talk about construction and real estate, what's the distinctive difference?
Now, construction involves most times various sort of activities that are intermediary. Real estate often is more high level, but construction is activities that often...
Let's jump to the next one.
Yes, exactly. I was just going to where you were about to go to, Chamberlain. The IGR estimates that you have, we're looking at the Southwest with the highest figure, 392 billion. as to the Northeast that is having 30. Why do we have this large margin? Why do we have such a gap?
It's because of where the opportunities are. And I like how you mentioned IGR, because that is where the government, especially at the sub-national level, the states, that is where they can really get the funds to invest in basic education. And the evidence we have today, for instance, is from the NBS, is that last year Lagos is estimated to be generating as much as 301 billion naira in IGR, Gimba. Now, 301 billion naira as Lagos IGR for last year is more than all the 19 states in the north combined together. So it simply makes you look at it that perhaps all the 19 states really should be one state. Because Lagos is the smallest state in the country. So if the smallest state in terms of size, yes, there's proximity to the port, but if the smallest state in the country has an IGR, Gimba, that is greater than all the 19 states in the northern region combined, then we know we've got a problem. More importantly, Chamberlain, is we must not only find a way to get students to learn, we now need to start getting students to think, like Confucius said.
So there you go. That's a fine place to leave it today. We've seen some of the reasons why the challenge in funding or improving basic education exists. It's now up to those relevant authorities to pick it from there and correct it. Babajide Ogunsanwo, Channel TV's data and info analyst, thank you for coming on this morning. And that's where we end the program today. But don't forget, you can keep the conversation going. Tweet at us on any matter, and then we'll get a response. We'll see you next week. Well, we thank you all for watching today. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
I like the way you started with the AK-47 toy, and Chamberlain has said that the DSS needn't worry about that. We're perfectly safe. Mark, you also saw that, didn't you?
I definitely did, Gimba.
An interesting one from our data analyst. I want to thank you so much indeed for watching Sunrise this morning. I'm Gimba Omar.
And I'm Maokwe Ogun. Have a lovely weekend.